They say the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. Apparently, the way to the Alpha King's obsession is by hitting him directly in the face with a rejected buttermilk pancake. I didn't know he was the ruler of the entire Western Hemisphere. I thought he was the agency dishwasher who was 40 minutes late to the brunch rush from hell. Most women drop a handkerchief to get a king's attention. I dropped a scorching hot, half-cooked disc of batter onto his forehead. And the worst part? He didn't execute me for treason. He didn't even yell. He just slowly, deliberately, licked the syrup off his eyebrow and decided I was the most interesting thing he'd seen in a century. This is how I accidentally became Alpha's problem. Welcome back to the pack. You are listening to Raven's Library, your sanctuary for the best shifter romance stories on YouTube. Before we turn up the heat on today's episode, I want to know, where in the world are you tuning in from right now? And do you have a furry reading buddy keeping you company? Let me know in the comments below. And hey, if you want to skip the ads, get early access to every chapter, and unlock exclusive stories, consider joining our channel membership. It's the best way to support the library and keep the stories coming. Now, grab a snack, preferably not one you have to throw, and let's dive in. Chapter 1. Less wandering, more washing. Grab a scour pad or get out of my kitchen. I didn't wait for a response. I didn't even look up. The ticket machine was printing so fast it sounded like it was having a seizure. Table 7 needed a veggie omelet. Table 3 was sending back the Benedict for the second time, and I was exactly one nervous breakdown away from burning the building down for the insurance money. I said, "Move it!" I snapped, grabbing a reject pancake, burnt on one side, raw on the other, off the cooling rack. I spun on my heel, spatula in hand, and aggressively flicked the disc over my shoulder, intending to bank it into the waste bin by the back door. It was a move I'd made 1,000 times. It didn't hit the bin. It hit a face. A wet, sizzling thwack echoed through the kitchen, louder than the clatter of pans. The chaos stopped instantly. The sous chef dropped a whisk into the hollandaise. The fry cook stopped breathing. Even the exhaust fans seemed to stutter into silence. I froze, my spatula still raised like a weapon, and turned slowly. Standing in the doorway wasn't the scrawny teenager from the temp agency. It was a man who looked like he was carved out of granite and old money. He was wearing a tuxedo that cost more than my entire culinary education, filling the door frame with shoulders that were far too broad for a civilian. And currently, there was a steaming, syrup-soaked pancake stuck to his left cheekbone. I watched in horror as gravity did its work. The pancake peeled away from his skin with a wet slurp, sliding down his jawline to land on the pristine lapel of his jacket. A single streak of maple syrup remained on his face, glistening under the fluorescent lights. The kitchen staff was trembling. I could smell the terror coming off them in waves, a sharp, acrid scent that meant only one thing. This wasn't a health inspector. This was a wolf, a high-ranking one. He didn't rage. He didn't shift. He didn't roar. Slowly, terrifyingly, he reached up and wiped the streak of syrup from his cheek with a thumb. He brought the digit to his mouth, tasting it with a dark, contemplative focus that made the hair on my arm stand up. "A little heavy on the vanilla," he murmured, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the floorboards and settled deep in my chest. "But the texture is adequate." He locked eyes with me. His irises were a shocking, molten gold. "Is this the customary greeting at the Griddle and Growl? Or am I special?" My brain finally rebooted. I should have apologized. I should have fallen to my knees and offered to dry clean his suit with my own tears. But I was 3 hours into a shift with no caffeine, and he was standing in my expo window.
"You're standing in a blast zone without non-slip shoes," I said, my voice sharp enough to cut glass. "If you aren't the dishwasher, you're a liability. Get out." The entire kitchen staff gasped. My sous chef, Marco, looked like he was praying for a swift death. The stranger blinked. For a second, he looked genuinely confused, as if he was waiting for the translation. Then, the corner of his mouth ticked up. "A liability," he repeated, testing the word like it was a fine wine. He took a step forward, entering the kitchen proper. The air pressure in the room dropped, heavy with the scent of ozone and expensive cologne. "Do you know who I am, little chef?" "I don't care if you're the Pope or the Prime Minister," I countered, pointing my spatula at his chest. "You are violating Health Code Section 4 Alpha. No civilians past the swinging doors. Out. Now." He didn't stop. He walked right up to the stainless steel prep table, ignoring the chaos of the brunch rush, and leaned in. He was so tall I had to crane my neck back to keep eye contact. He radiated heat, a furnace in a suit, and his gaze dropped to the name embroidered on my chef's coat. "Cleo," he read, his voice dropping an octave. "You have excellent aim, Cleo, and zero survival instincts." He picked up the fallen pancake from his shoulder, inspected it, and took a bite. A real, actual bite. He chewed it slowly, eyes never leaving mine, devouring my mistake like it was a Michelin star delicacy. "I was coming here to shut this building down," he said, swallowing. "I bought the block this morning. I intended to evict everyone by noon." My stomach dropped. "You bought the building?" "I did." He leaned closer, invading my personal space until all I could smell was rain and power. "But I've changed my mind. The food is dangerous, and the staff is hostile. It's the most interesting lunch I've had in years." He pulled a gold money clip from his pocket, peeled off a bill that had more zeros than I'd ever seen, and stabbed it onto the ticket spike. "You're hired," he whispered. "I already work here," I hissed, refusing to back down even as my heart hammered against my ribs. "I own the place." "Not the building," he smirked, turning to leave. "Fix the vanilla ratio, Cleo. I'll be back for dinner." Chapter 2. The swinging door settled into a stillness that felt heavier than the silence of a tomb. For 10 seconds, nobody moved. The fry cook was still holding a basket of dripping fries out of the oil. The dishwasher was staring at the spot where the stranger had stood, looking like he'd just seen a ghost. Marco, my sous chef, slid down the side of the prep counter until he hit the floor. He put his head between his knees and began to hyperventilate. "Get up, Marco!" I snapped, though my own hands were shaking as I scraped the grill. "We have tickets hanging. Table 4 is waiting on their scramble." "Table 4 can wait until I restart my heart," Marco wheezed, looking up at me with eyes the size of dinner plates. "Cleo, boss, do you have a death wish, or are you just blissfully ignorant of the geopolitical landscape of the shifter world?" "He was in my kitchen," I argued, flipping a burger with more aggression than necessary. He was a health code violation in a 3-piece suit. "That was Silas Thatcher," Marco whispered, saying the name like it was a prayer. "The Prime Alpha. The man who owns half the city's skyline. The man who single-handedly negotiated the trade embargo with the Southern Pax. You just threw a buttermilk projectile at the most powerful predator on the continent." I paused. The name rang a faint bell,
mostly from the headlines of magazines I never had time to read. Silas Thatcher. Calculated. Ruthless. Filthy rich. Well, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He shouldn't have been standing in the expo window. And if he really bought the building, we have bigger problems than a pancake. We're going to be evicted. The panic set in then. Not fear of the alpha, but fear for my business. The griddle and growl was my life. I had scraped together every cent, fought for every permit, and bled for every menu item. If he closed us down, I was finished. The rest of the shift was a blur of paranoia. Every time the door chime rang, I expected a SWAT team or a demolition crew. By the time we flipped the sign to closed and began the scrub down, my nerves were frayed wires. Then there was a knock at the service entrance. Marco yelped and dove behind the industrial mixer. I rolled my eyes, grabbed my sharpest boning knife, just in case, and unlocked the heavy steel door. It wasn't a demolition crew. It was a courier, dressed in a uniform so crisp it made my chef coats look like rags. He didn't speak. He simply held out a heavy, velvet-wrapped package. "For the chef," he said, his voice flat. I took it. He bowed slightly and vanished into the alleyway shadows before I could ask if I was being served a lawsuit. I carried the package to the stainless steel island. Marco peeked out from behind the mixer. "Is it a bomb?" "If it is, it's a very fancy one," I muttered, undoing the velvet. It wasn't a bomb. It was a jar, a massive, hand-blown crystal jar that refracted the kitchen lights into rainbows, and it was filled to the brim, not with cookies, but with gold coins, heavy, solid gold coins stamped with the Thatcher crest. Nestled on top of the gold was a heavy cream card with elegant, sharp handwriting. "Tuition for the cooking lesson. Your technique is aggressive but effective. I'll be back for breakfast. S." I stared at the gold. It was enough to pay my rent for a year. It was an insult. It was a challenge. "He's coming back," Marco squeaked, looking at the card. "He's actually coming back." I slammed the lid onto the jar. "Let him come," I growled, shoving the gold toward the office safe. "If he thinks he can buy my dignity with a tip jar, he's got another thing coming. Tomorrow, I'm not serving pancakes. I'm serving attitude." Chapter 3. The morning sun hadn't even breached the horizon when I unlocked the front door, but the smell of rain and expensive cologne was already lingering in the air. I stopped dead in the entryway. The restaurant should have been empty. It wasn't. Silas Thatcher was sitting at table 4, the chef's counter, directly facing the open kitchen. He had a laptop open, a stack of documents spread out on the varnished wood, and a mug of coffee that I definitely hadn't brewed. He looked up as I entered, his golden eyes tracking my movement with predatory laziness. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo today. He was wearing a charcoal gray suit that fit him like a second skin. The jacket draped over the back of the chair to reveal a dress shirt rolled up to his elbows. His forearms were thick, corded with muscle, and dusted with dark hair. "You're early," he said, his voice rough with morning sleep. "I open at 6, I replied, dropping my bag behind the counter and tying my apron with sharp, angry jerks. "You don't have a key. How did you get in?" "I own the building, Cleo," he said calmly, typing something on his laptop. "I have keys to every door. And I didn't like the look of your deadbolt. My security team replaced it an hour ago." I froze. I checked the front door. Sure enough, the lock was new, heavy-duty and gleaming. "You changed the locks on my business?"
I marched up to the counter, slamming my hands down on the wood. That is illegal. Landlord or not, you need to give notice. Silas stopped typing. He closed the laptop slowly and leaned forward, resting his chin on his interlaced fingers. I am inspecting my investment. The previous owner let the infrastructure rot. The wiring is a hazard, the ventilation is subpar, and your coffee machine is a tragedy. He gestured to the sleek chrome monstrosity sitting on the back counter where my trusty dented brewer used to be. I brought you a new one, he added, Italian, calibrated to the barometric pressure. I don't want your coffee machine, I seethed. I want you to leave. I have prep to do. I can't have the king of the shifters looming over my cutting board while I'm trying to dice onions. Then pretend I'm not here, he said simply, opening his laptop again. Pretend you're not here? I laughed, a harsh, incredulous sound. You take up all the oxygen in the room. You're sitting at my best table, radiating dominance like a nuclear reactor. Table 4 offers the best view of the kitchen, he murmured, his eyes flicking to my hands as I instinctively reached for a knife to start prepping. I like to watch the process. It's soothing. I am not a performance artist, I snapped, grabbing a bag of carrots. And this isn't a spectator sport. It is now, Silas countered. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a gold coin, identical to the ones in the jar, and spun it on the table. It hummed as it rotated, a mesmerizing flash of wealth. I'm renting this table, indefinitely. The rent is double whatever you would make from turning it over. He slapped his hand down on the coin, stopping it dead. Get to work, Cleo. I'm hungry. I glared at him. He stared back, unblinking, a faint smirk playing on his lips. He wasn't leaving. He was settling in. He was invading my sanctuary, my territory, and he knew exactly how much it infuriated me. Fine, I whispered, grabbing my knife. You want to watch? Watch this. I started chopping the carrots with a speed and violence that would have terrified a lesser man. Silas didn't flinch. He just watched, his golden eyes darkening, devouring every movement. Chapter 4. By 10 a.m., the restaurant was packed, and Silas was ruining everything. He hadn't moved from table 4. He was holding court. He had taken 3 conference calls in the last hour, speaking in fluent Mandarin, then French, then a guttural, growling language that made the hair on my neck stand up. The customers were distracted. The women were preening, trying to catch his eye. The men were eating quickly, nervous about being in the presence of a prime alpha. My staff was useless. Marco had dropped 3 eggs because he was too busy trying to eavesdrop on Silas's conversation about global shipping lanes. He's disrupting the flow, I muttered, plating a waffle with trembling hands. He's bad for business. He's great for business, Marco whispered, gesturing to the line of people waiting outside. Look at the window. People are tweeting that he's here. We've never had a line this long on a Tuesday. I don't care, I growled. He's arrogant, he's smug, and he's looking at me like I'm the special of the day. I glanced over the pass. Silas was off the phone now. He was leaning back, watching me wipe down a station. He caught my eye and winked. That was it. The wink broke me. Order up, I said to Marco, my voice dangerously calm. I'm going to make a special for table 4. Marco paled. Cleo, don't. He's the king. He's a customer, I corrected, reaching for the small sealed jar I kept on the top shelf. And he said the pancakes were dry.
Let's see how he likes the Reaper. I fired up the skillet. I threw in onions, jalapenos, and a generous scoop of the ghost pepper paste I used for my own personal meals, the kind that made grown men weep. I added eggs, chorizo, and enough cayenne to strip paint. The fumes alone made my eyes water. "You're going to kill him," Marco hissed. "On shifter," I said, plating the scramble. It looked innocent enough, fluffy and golden, hiding its lethal heat. "He has rapid healing. He'll survive. He'll just need a lot of water, and maybe he'll finally leave to go find a fire extinguisher." I walked out of the kitchen, carrying the plate myself. The chatter in the dining room died down as I approached the counter. I slid the plate in front of Silas. "Compliments of the chef," I said sweetly. "A little something to wake you up." Silas looked at the food, then up at me. He sniffed the air. He knew. He had to know. The capsaicin content was practically weaponized. "You're trying to hurt me, Cleo," he said softly, picking up his fork. "I'm just testing your palate," I replied, crossing my arms. "You said you wanted flavor." He held my gaze and took a massive bite. I waited for the cough. I waited for the watering eyes, the grab for the water glass, the gasp of pain. Silas chewed slowly. He swallowed. He didn't reach for his water. Instead, a flush of color rose up his neck, and his pupils dilated until his eyes were almost entirely black. He licked his lips, tasting the heat. He leaned forward, closer than he had been before. The scent of him, spices and alpha pheromones, hit me like a physical blow. "Delicious," he rasped, his voice dropping to a gravelly purr that went straight to my core. "It burns." He took another bite, ignoring the sweat starting to bead on his temple. "I love it when you try to hurt me, Cleo," he whispered, so only I could hear. "Do it again." Chapter 5. I stood frozen, the empty plate between us acting as a fragile shield against the sudden shift in atmospheric pressure. Silas's whisper, "Do it again," hung in the air, heavier than the humidity of the kitchen. He wasn't reacting to the ghost peppers. He was reacting to me. The heat in his eyes had nothing to do with Scoville units, and everything to do with the fact that I was the only person in the room who wasn't bowing to him. "You're insane," I breathed, snatching the plate away. "You have a stomach of steel and a brain made of rocks." "And you," he murmured, leaning back as the flush on his neck began to recede, "are the most refreshing thing to happen to this city since the invention of air conditioning." I turned on my heel and marched back to the line, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I needed to focus. I needed to cook. Cooking was logic. Cooking was chemistry. Cooking was safe. The 6'4" billionaire wolf sitting 10 feet away was chaos incarnate. "Marco, fire table 6!" I yelled, perhaps a little too loudly. "Table 6 is a fruit cup, chef," Marco whispered, eyeing me with concern. "Then cut the fruit aggressively," I snapped. I grabbed a metal spatula and turned to the flat-top grill. I needed to scrape it. I needed to clean something. I poured a little too much oil on the scorching hot metal, distracted by the sensation of golden eyes burning a hole between my shoulder blades. The oil hit the superheated grease trap at the back of the grill. Whoosh! A pillar of orange flame shot up, licking the stainless steel hood vents. It was a grease flare-up, standard, manageable if you were paying attention. But I wasn't paying attention. I flinched back, knocking over a bottle of high-proof bourbon used for the flambé special. The bottle shattered on the edge of the grill. The alcohol hit the fire. The flame didn't just grow, it roared. A ball of fire erupted outward, rolling toward the ceiling, triggering the pre-alarm screech of the Ansel fire suppression system. "Back!" I screamed at the line cooks. But before I could even cover my face, the world blurred. I didn't feel the heat of the fire. I felt an impact, hard, unyielding, and smelling of rain. Silas had vaulted the counter. 1 second he was seated, the next he was a blur of motion that defied physics. He tackled me, his arm sweeping around my waist, lifting me off my feet and twisting his body to shield mine. He slammed us both backward, through the swinging door of the dry storage pantry. We hit the floor hard, sliding into a stack of 50-pound flour sacks. The pantry door swung shut, sealing us in semi-darkness, muffled from the chaos of the kitchen. I gasped, winded, staring up. Silas was hovering over me, his body a heavy, protective cage. His elbows were braced on the flour sacks on either side of my head, keeping his weight off me, but just barely. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, his voice a low growl. The playfulness was gone. This was pure alpha instinct. I'm fine," I stammered, my hands instinctively clutching the lapels of his suit jacket. "It was just a flare-up. The suppression system would have doused you in chemical foam," he finished, his face inches from mine. "It's carcinogenic and impossible to get out of hair." He didn't move. We were tangled together in the dark, smelling of flour and expensive wool. His heart was beating against my chest, slow, heavy thuds that felt like a war drum. "You moved." I swallowed hard, realizing the impossibility of it. "You moved too fast." "I moved as fast as I needed to," he said, his gaze dropping to my lips. The air in the pantry became thin. The adrenaline from the fire was mutating into something else, something electric and dangerous. I could feel the heat radiating off him, burning through his shirt. He wasn't pulling away, he was leaning in. His thumb grazed my cheekbone, wiping away a smudge of flour I didn't know was there. His touch was calloused and incredibly gentle. "You smell like vanilla and arson," he whispered. "It's intoxicating." My breath hitched. I should push him off. I should yell at him for tackling me. But my body betrayed me. I tilted my head back, my lips parting slightly. Silas's eyes darkened to black. He lowered his head, his mouth hovering a millimeter from mine. I could feel the warmth of his breath. Then the pantry door swung open. "Chef, the fire's out! False alarm on the—" "Oh my God!" Marco stood in the doorway, bathed in the harsh kitchen light. He stared at the Alpha King pinning his boss to a pile of flour sacks. Silas froze. He closed his eyes for a brief second, a muscle in his jaw jumping, before he pushed himself up and away from me. The loss of his warmth was instant and jarring. "We're fine," Silas said, straightening his suit jacket as if he hadn't just been about to devour me. He looked at me, his expression unreadable. "Try not to burn down my investment, Cleo." The adrenaline crash was brutal. By the time the last customer left and the floors were mopped, I felt like I had gone 12 rounds in a boxing ring. My knees ached, my hair was a disaster, and I had flour in places flour should never be. I locked the front door and flipped the sign to closed. Silence finally descended on the griddle and growl. Except it wasn't empty. I turned around. Silas was still there. He hadn't left since the pantry incident. He had sat at table 4 for 12 straight hours, working silently while I avoided looking at him. "We're closed," I said, my voice hoarse. "Go home to your castle, Silas." He looked up from his laptop. The blue light of the screen cast sharp shadows on his face. He looked tired, not human tired, but ancient tired, the kind of exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix. "I don't want to go home," he said simply. "It's quiet there." "Too quiet." "And here it's loud and smells like grease," I countered, walking behind the counter to start the final wipe down. Why are you really here? You own the world. You can eat gold leaf steak in Paris. Why are you sitting in a diner in the neutral zone watching me scrape a grill? Silas closed his laptop. He stood up and walked to the counter, taking a seat on a stool directly across from me. Because the steak in Paris is cold by the time it gets to me, he said, and the people serving it are terrified I'll kill them if they spill the wine. You throw pancakes at me. It's honest. I paused, rag in hand. I looked at him, really looked at him. Beneath the power and the arrogance, there was a hollowness. He was a man who had everything and nothing. You're hungry, I stated. It wasn't a question. I could eat, he admitted. I'm not making the Reaper again, I said, tossing the rag into the sanitizer bucket. And the grill is off. You're getting comfort food. I moved to the sandwich station. I grabbed 2 thick slices of sourdough, a generous slab of sharp cheddar, and a slice of Gruyere. I buttered the bread with precision. Silas watched me, his chin resting on his hand. Grilled cheese? Don't knock it, I warned, firing up the panini press. It's the great equalizer. Kings and paupers, everyone loves melted cheese. The kitchen was quiet as the bread sizzled. It was a comfortable silence this time. The tension from the pantry had simmered down into something warmer, like embers after a fire. I slid the plate across the counter to him. Golden brown, oozing cheese, cut diagonally because I wasn't a savage. Silas picked up a half. He took a bite. The crunch echoed in the empty room. He closed his eyes, and for the first time all day, his shoulders dropped. My mother used to make this, he said quietly, before the pack wars. See? I leaned my elbows on the counter, watching him eat. Better than gold leaf. Much better. He finished the first half and reached for the second. Then he stopped. He looked at my hand resting on the stainless steel. Slowly, deliberately, he reached out and covered my hand with his. His palm was warm, massive, encompassing my fingers completely. Thank you, Cleo, he said. It was the first time he had said my name without a tease or a threat. It sounded intimate. It's just a sandwich, I whispered, my heart doing that stupid flutter again. It's not just a sandwich, he corrected. His thumb stroked the back of my hand, sending shivers up my arm. It's care. No one cares for the king. They only ask from him. For a moment, the world narrowed down to the warmth of his hand on mine. I felt a pull, a magnetic drag toward him that terrified me. I wanted to lean across the counter. I wanted to see if he tasted like vanilla and arson, too. Silas, I started, not sure what I was going to say. Before he could answer, a bright flash of light erupted from the street outside the front window, then another, then a dozen. Silas's head snapped toward the window. His hand tightened on mine, not in affection, but in protection. His eyes instantly shifted to gold. What is that? I asked, squinting against the glare. Reporters, Silas growled, his voice dropping to a dangerous rumble. They found us. Chapter 7. The peaceful bubble of the late-night kitchen didn't just pop, it was obliterated. Reporters? I pulled my hand away from Silas's grip, instinctually backing away from the window. Why? It's midnight on a Tuesday. Because, Silas stood up, buttons his suit jacket with a sharp, fluid motion. Someone posted a video of the Pancake incident on Shifter Talk. It has 3 million views. Shifter Talk? I choked. That's a thing? It is, and apparently the caption is, "Brave human female dominates alpha king." Silas's jaw tightened. The press isn't here for the food, Cleo. They're here to see the woman who made me look domesticated. Outside, the flashing lights were intensifying. I could see silhouettes pressing against the glass, cameras, microphones, hungry faces. A fist banged on the locked door. "Oh God," I whispered. "My customers, my reputation."
They're going to turn this place into a circus.
"Stay here," Silas commanded. He pulled his phone from his pocket and hit a speed dial number. "Status." He listened for a second, his eyes scanning the street. "Clear the perimeter. Level 4 protocol. I want the sidewalk empty in 5 minutes, and kill the live feeds." He hung up. "My security team is inbound." "I didn't ask for your security team," I snapped, the panic turning into defensive anger. "I can handle a few paparazzi. I have a hose out back." "These aren't paparazzi, Cleo. These are pack media. They are wolves. They will smell your fear, and they will tear your privacy to shreds to get a quote." He turned to me, his face hard. "You are under my protection." "I don't want your protection," I shouted, gesturing at the window where a drone was now hovering. "I want to cook eggs. I want my normal, boring life back. You brought this here. You and your kingness." "I am handling it," he said, his voice brooking no argument. Suddenly, tires screeched outside. Heavy black SUVs pulled up to the curb, mounting the sidewalk. Men in dark suits poured out, large men, moving with the synchronized grace of predators. They formed a wall between the cameras and the restaurant, physically shoving reporters back. It looked like a military operation. "This is handling it?" I watched in horror as one of his guards snatched a camera from a reporter and crushed it in one hand. "You're assaulting the press!" "They are trespassing on my property," Silas said coldly. "And they are harassing my tenant." "Tenant?" I spun on him. "Is that what I am? A tenant you need to manage?" "You are someone I am trying to keep safe." He stepped closer, his height overwhelming me. "Why do you fight every attempt I make to help you?" "Because your help feels like a takeover." I poked him in the chest, right on his silk tie. "You buy my building. You replace my locks. You bring your army to my doorstep. You aren't helping me, Silas. You're occupying me." Silas grabbed my hand, stopping the poking. He held it against his chest, right over his heart. I could feel the powerful, slow beat of it. "Maybe I am," he admitted, his voice dropping to a rough whisper. "Because I don't know how else to keep you close." I stared at him, my mouth falling open. Before I could process that confession, the back door of the kitchen burst open. I spun around, expecting Marco or a delivery. It wasn't. 3 more men in suits walked in, Silas's men. But they weren't looking at the door. They were looking at me. One of them, a man with a scar running down his neck, stepped forward. "Alpha," the scarred man said, bowing his head to Silas but keeping his eyes on me. "The perimeter is secure, but we have a problem. The council has seen the video." Silas went rigid. His hand dropped from mine. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by the mask of the king. "And?" Silas demanded. "And they are calling for an inquiry," the guard said. "They claim her disrespect weakens your standing. They want her removed from the city." Silas turned to me. The look in his eyes wasn't protection anymore. It was possession. Let them try. Silas snarled. No one touches her. She stays right where she is. I'm standing right here, I yelled, waving my arms, and I am not going anywhere. If the council wants me, tell them I have a cast iron skillet and I'm not afraid to use it. Silas looked at me, and a slow, terrifying smile spread across his face. I believe, he told the guard, that is exactly what they are afraid of. Chapter 8. The morning after the Pancake incident went viral, the atmosphere in the Griddle and Growl had shifted from chaotic to strangely suffocating. Thanks to Silas's security team, the paparazzi were gone, replaced by two large men in suits standing by the door, who looked like they ate raw nails for breakfast. But the absence of cameras brought a new kind of clientele. The tourists. Specifically, the wealthy shifter elite who wanted to gawk at the human woman who had dared to sass their king. I was chopping scallions with aggressive precision when the door chimed. The air in the kitchen instantly soured, smelling of expensive perfume and entitlement. A woman walked in who looked less like a person and more like a carefully curated Instagram feed. She wore a white cashmere coat that probably cost more than my car, and her hair was so perfect it looked aerodynamic. She didn't wait to be seated. She bypassed the host stand and walked straight to the pass, tapping a manicured fingernail on the stainless steel counter. You, she said. She didn't ask. She summoned. I didn't look up from my scallions. Table service only. Please wait to be seated. I am Lady Genevieve of the High Crescent, she announced, her voice dripping with the kind of condescension that usually requires a title. And I wish to see the creature. I stopped chopping. I slowly wiped my hands on my apron and looked up. The creature? We have a frantic dishwasher named Dave, but I don't think he takes visitors. Genevieve sneered. It was an ugly look on a pretty face. Don't play coy, human. I'm talking about you, the little pet Silas has picked up. I wanted to see if the rumors were true, that his taste had degraded so thoroughly. The kitchen went silent. Marco froze mid-whisk. My taste, I said, leaning over the counter, is excellent. My pancakes are fluffy, my bacon is crisp, and my tolerance for rudeness is 0. If you aren't ordering, get out. Genevieve laughed, a tinkling, cold sound. You think you can order me around? I am a Luna candidate. You are hired help. Now fetch me a mineral water, ice on the side, and try not to touch the rim of the glass. I don't know where your hands have been. My hand twitched toward the bucket of dirty rag water. It would be so easy, so satisfying. But before I could commit social suicide, a shadow fell over the counter. Silas emerged from the back office. He wasn't wearing his jacket. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing those distractingly thick forearms. He walked up to the pass, standing directly between me and Genevieve. Silas! Genevieve's voice transformed instantly into a purr. She leaned forward, offering a dazzling smile. I was just telling your staff how quaint this little establishment is. I came to rescue you for lunch. Le Bernardin has a table waiting. Silas didn't look at her. He didn't even acknowledge her presence. Instead, he reached for a clean glass from the rack. He walked over to the filtered water tap, filled it, and added exactly 3 cubes of ice. He walked back to the counter. Genevieve extended her hand, her smile widening, expecting the drink. Silas moved past her hand. He placed the glass in front of me. Hydrate, he commanded softly, his golden eyes locked on mine. It's hot back here, You look flushed." Genevieve's hand was left hanging in midair. Her smile faltered, then shattered. "Silas?" she choked out. I asked for water." Silas finally turned to her. His expression was bored, as if she were a fly buzzing near his ear. "This is a restaurant, Genevieve. If you want water, ask the server. If you want to insult the chef, you answer to me." His voice dropped, low and vibrating with a warning growl. "And I suggest you leave before I decide to ban the entire High Crescent lineage from the premises." Genevieve turned a shade of pale usually reserved for uncooked dough. She looked at Silas, then at me, holding the glass of water he had served me. The insult was absolute. The king served the cook. She spun on her designer heels and fled, the door chiming cheerfully behind her. Silas turned back to me, leaning his hip against the counter. "Are you all right?" I stared at the water glass. "You just humiliated a Luna candidate for me." "She was annoying," Silas shrugged. "And she was interrupting my view of you chopping onions." "Silas," I said, feeling a dangerous warmth spreading in my chest that had nothing to do with the ovens. "You can't just serve me. It upsets the natural order." "I like the natural order," he murmured, reaching out to tuck a stray lock of hair behind my ear. "But I like you more." Chapter 9. I walked into the Griddle and Grell the next morning at 5 a.m., ready to prep the hollandaise, and immediately dropped my keys. My kitchen was gone. Well, the room was there, but my kitchen, the one with the dented stove I'd bought at a salvage auction, the prep table that wobbled slightly to the left, and the fryer that hummed in B-flat, was gone. In its place was a gleaming, sterile laboratory of culinary perfection. The stove was a 6-burner French top range made of brushed steel and gold accents. The ovens were digital, with touchscreens that probably had Wi-Fi. The counters were marble, which is terrible for hot pans. Even the knives on the magnetic strip were new, Japanese Damascus steel that cost more than my first car. "Prize!" Silas was sitting at table 4, looking incredibly pleased with himself. He had a mug of coffee from the new $10,000 espresso machine and a look of expectant pride. "What?" My voice came out as a squeak. I cleared my throat. "What did you do?" "I upgraded you," Silas said, standing up and walking into the kitchen. He ran a hand along the marble counter. "Top of the line, imported from Germany. That oven can maintain temperature within 1/10 of a degree. You are a master, Cleo. You shouldn't be working with scrap metal." I felt the blood drain from my face, then rush back in a tidal wave of fury. "Where is my stove?" I whispered. "The scrap metal?" Silas waved a hand dismissively. "I had it hauled away. It was a safety hazard." "Hauled away?" I stepped toward him, my hands balling into fists. That scrap metal was the first thing I ever bought. I cooked 10,000 meals on that stove. I knew exactly where the hot spots were. I knew how to kick the door to make it seal. It was mine. Silas's smile faded. He looked confused. "But this is better. It's efficient. It's cleaner. I'm giving you the best tools because you deserve them." "You aren't giving me tools!" I shouted, the sound echoing off the new, cold appliances. "You're erasing me! You walked in here and decided my things weren't good enough, so you replaced them. You treated my kitchen like a dollhouse you could just renovate." "I was trying to help," Silas said, his voice hardening slightly. "Why is everything a battle with you? I have given you a kitchen chefs would kill for. I didn't ask for it! I poked him in the chest, hard. That's the point, Silas!
I built this place. Me. Alone. With my own money and my own sweat. When you buy everything, when you replace everything, it's not mine anymore. It's yours. I'm just an employee in Silas Thatcher's world. The realization hit me hard, stinging my eyes. I feel like a pet you bought a fancy new cage for. Silas flinched. The hurt flashed across his face, raw and open. That is not what I intended. I don't care what you intended, I choked out, fighting back tears. I care that you didn't ask. You don't know how to be a partner, Silas. You only know how to be a king. You just throw gold at problems until they turn into what you want. I pointed to the door. Get out. Cleo, get out, I screamed. Take your gold knobs and your digital ovens and get out. I can't cook in this. I can't breathe in here. Silas stared at me for a long moment. He looked at the gleaming stove, then back at my furious, tear-streaked face. He realized, finally, that his grand gesture was a grand failure. I will have your old equipment returned, he said quietly, his voice devoid of its usual power. It's in storage. I didn't destroy it. He turned and walked out the back door. He didn't look back. I stood alone in the perfect $1 million kitchen. It was cold. It was silent. It was magnificent. And I hated every square inch of it. Chapter 10. 2 days passed. Silas didn't come to the restaurant. He didn't sit at table 4. The old stove was returned within 3 hours of our fight, reinstalled by a terrified crew of contractors who wouldn't make eye contact with me. The kitchen was mine again, but it felt empty. The sizzle was gone. I told myself I was relieved. I told myself I needed space. I was lying. On the 3rd evening, I was at home in my apartment, a tiny 3rd-floor walk-up that smelled of old books and basil. I was wearing sweatpants and a stained t-shirt, eating cereal for dinner because chefs never cook for themselves. There was a knock on the door. I froze. My building had a buzzer, but it was broken. Anyone could walk up. But the knock wasn't aggressive. It was hesitant. I looked through the peephole. It was Silas. But he didn't look like the Alpha King. He was wearing dark jeans and a black t-shirt that fit him a little too well. No jacket, no tie. He was holding a brown paper grocery bag in one arm. I opened the door. If you're here to renovate my living room, I said, leaning against the door frame, I'm calling the police. Silas offered a crooked, tentative smile. It made him look younger. No renovations, just groceries. He held up the bag. It wasn't from the high-end organic market. It was from the budget store down the block, the one with the flickering neon sign. I bought the cheap stuff, he said. The pasta that turns into glue if you look at it wrong, the sauce in the jar with the high-fructose corn syrup, the vegetables that aren't quite symmetrical. I stared at the bag, then at him. Why? Because you said I don't know how to work for it, Silas said, his golden eyes serious. You were right. I've never had to fix anything. I've just replaced it. I want to learn how to cook with you, on your terms, in your kitchen. He gestured vaguely behind me, assuming you have a kitchen. I sighed, stepping back to let him in. It's a galley kitchen, Silas. If you stand in it, you'll block the light. I'll manage, he said, stepping inside. My apartment was small, but he didn't look around with judgment. He looked at it with curiosity. He followed me into the kitchen, which was indeed tiny. He unpacked the groceries. He had bought the most generic, processed ingredients possible. It was hilarious and weirdly touching.
Okay, I said, tying my hair back. Lesson 1. We are not using that jarred sauce. We are making a marinara from scratch using these sad-looking tomatoes. Understood, chef, he said. We cooked. It was chaotic. Silas had terrible knife skills. He held the onion like it was a grenade. No, like this, I said, moving beside him. Tuck your fingers. Use your knuckles as a guide. I reached out, placing my hands over his to guide the knife. The contact was electric. His skin was hot, his hands massive under mine. We were standing so close in the cramped kitchen that his chest was pressed against my back. I could feel the rumble of his hum as he concentrated. Like this, he whispered, his voice right by my ear. Yes, I breathed, losing my train of thought. He stopped chopping. He turned in my arms, trapping me between his body and the counter. The knife clattered to the cutting board. His hands came up to cut my face. He smelled of tomatoes and rain. I don't want to fix you, Cleo, he murmured, his thumb tracing my lower lip. I just want to be with you, even if it means eating burnt toast. I don't burn toast, I whispered weakly. Prove it, he challenged, leaning down. His lips were inches from mine. My eyes fluttered shut. The air was thick with the scent of simmering garlic and undeniable desire. Burring, burring. Silas's phone, sitting on the counter, vibrated violently against the laminate. He groaned, resting his forehead against mine. Ignore it. It's the emergency ringtone, I noted, recognizing the shrill sound from the restaurant. You said only the council uses that line. Silas pulled back, his eyes flashing with annoyance. He grabbed the phone and looked at the screen. His face went stone cold. The softness vanished. What is it? I asked, the spell broken. It's the elders, Silas said, his voice flat. They aren't just threatening sanctions anymore. They've frozen my personal accounts, and they're demanding I abdicate the throne if I don't sever ties with the human. The air in my tiny kitchen, which seconds ago had been thick with the scent of simmering tomatoes and impending intimacy, instantly dropped to absolute zero. Silas didn't look like the man who had just been struggling to chop an onion. He looked like a statue carved from ice. He stared at the phone screen for another heartbeat, his jaw working as if he were chewing on glass. Then, he slid the phone into his pocket and stepped back. The warmth of his body vanished, leaving me cold and exposed against the counter. I have to go, he said. His voice wasn't the gravelly purr I was used to. It was flat, corporate, kingly. Silas? I reached out, my hand hovering in the space where his chest had been. What does that mean? Sever ties? They can't just tell you who to hang out with. They can do a lot more than that, Cleo, he said, turning toward the door without looking at me. I underestimated their timeline. I thought I had weeks to maneuver. I have hours. He grabbed the doorknob. His knuckles were white. Wait! I scrambled after him. So that's it? You get one scary phone call and you run? What about the pasta? What about us? He paused, his hand on the latch. For a second, his shoulders slumped, and I saw the man beneath the crown. Then he straightened up, armor back in place. There is no us if I am destitute and you are a target, he said coldly. Stay here. Don't come to the tower. Don't talk to the press. Just cook. And then he was gone. The door clicked shut, leaving me standing in a kitchen full of half-chopped vegetables, and a silence so loud it rang in my ears.
The next 3 days were a blur of misery and phantom limbs. The griddle and growl felt haunted. Table 4 sat empty. I found myself glancing at it every time the door chimed, expecting to see a charcoal suit and a smug grin. Instead, I got tourists taking selfies and regulars asking where Mr. Tall, Dark, and Expensive had gone. "He's busy," I snapped at Marco when he asked for the 10th time. "He runs the hemisphere. He doesn't have time for brunch." "He made time for brunch every day for 2 weeks," Marco pointed out unhelpfully, whisking a bowl of eggs with aggressive sadness. "He ghosted you, chef. It happens. Usually it's a text, not a royal decree, but still." "He didn't ghost me," I lied, scrubbing a spotless countertop until the laminate groaned. "He's handling business." But the silence from his end was deafening. No texts, no gold coins, no annoying security guards blocking the sidewalk. It was as if Silas Thatcher had never existed, except for the massive espresso machine gleaming in the corner, a chrome monument to my stupidity. On the 4th morning, the sky was a bruised purple, matching my mood. I was in the office, trying to focus on payroll, when Marco burst in. He wasn't holding a whisk. He was holding a remote control. "Don't kill the messenger," he said, looking pale. "But you need to see the news." He pointed to the small television mounted in the corner of the break room. I walked over, my stomach twisting into a knot. "What is it? Did the stock market crash?" "Worse," Marco whispered. On the screen, a polished news anchor with perfect hair was standing in front of the Thatcher Tower. The chyron at the bottom of the screen read, "Royal Unity, Alliance Confirmed." "Breaking news!" the anchor chirped. "Sources close to the council confirmed this morning that Prime Alpha Silas Thatcher is set to announce his engagement to Lady Genevieve of the High Crescent. The union is expected to stabilize the recent economic volatility and unite the northern and southern factions." The screen flashed a photo. It was Silas, looking grim in a tuxedo, standing next to Genevieve, who was beaming like a cat that had just eaten the canary and the birdcage. "The move comes after rumors of instability in the king's leadership," the anchor continued. "This marriage is seen as a return to tradition." I stared at the screen. The room spun. The tomato sauce in my veins turned to ice. He didn't just leave to protect his money. He left to marry her. The woman he had humiliated for me. The woman who treated people like furniture. "Chef?" Marco reached out a hand. "Do you want me to close up? We can get ice cream. Or tequila." I looked at the TV, then at my hands. They weren't shaking. They were balling into fists. "No," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "I don't want tequila. I want answers." I turned and marched into the kitchen. "Fire up the griddle, Marco," I ordered, tying my apron so tight it cut off my circulation. "I need to make a delivery." Chapter 12. I didn't take my car. I took a cab, because I needed my hands free to hold the takeout box. The box contained 3 buttermilk pancakes. They were cold. They were rubbery. And I had arranged them in the shape of a frown face using blueberries. It was petty, it was childish, and it was the only weapon I had. Silas Thatcher's corporate headquarters was a 60-story needle of glass and steel that pierced the sky. The lobby smelled like money and intimidation. The receptionist, a woman with glasses that probably had X-ray vision, looked up as I stormed toward the elevators. "Excuse me, miss," she said, standing up. "You can't go up there. The Alpha is in a high-level strategy meeting. I know, I said, not breaking stride. I'm the catering. We didn't order catering. Trust me. I slammed my hand on the elevator call button. He ordered this. He just forgot to pick it up. The security guard by the turnstile took a step toward me. He was big, wolfy, and wearing an earpiece. He squinted at me. Then his eyes widened. He recognized me. I was the Pancake girl from Shifter Talk, the girl the king had tackled into a pantry. He hesitated. If you stop me, I told him, holding up the grease-stained paper bag, I will tell the internet that Silas cries during rom-coms. I will ruin his reputation faster than you can say severance package. The guard blinked. He stepped back. Elevator 4 goes to the penthouse. I stepped in. The doors slid shut. I watched the numbers climb, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. 50, 55, 60. The doors opened directly into a boardroom. It was exactly as I imagined. A long mahogany table, 12 people in suits who looked like they hadn't smiled since the 90s. And at the head of the table, Silas. He looked terrible. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his tie was crooked. Lady Genevieve was sitting to his right, looking smug and touching his arm. The room went silent as I stepped out of the elevator. Gentlemen, I announced, my voice echoing off the glass walls.
And lady. Silas's head snapped up. His eyes widened in genuine horror. Cleo? What are you doing here? Delivery, I said. I marched down the length of the table. The executives recoiled as if I were carrying a bomb. I reached the head of the table and slammed the takeout box down in front of Silas. The lid popped open, revealing the sad, frowning pancakes. You forgot your breakfast, I said, my voice trembling with rage. And apparently, you forgot your spine. Genevieve stood up, her face twisting. Security! Get this waitress out of here! Sit down, Genevieve, I snapped, pointing a finger at her. Or I'll tell everyone how you stiffed me on the tip last week. I turned back to Silas. You ghosted me for 3 days, and then I find out from the news that you're marrying the Wicked Witch of the West? If you wanted to break up, Silas, you could have just sent a text. You didn't have to fake a geopolitical crisis. Silas looked at the pancakes. Then he looked at me. The shock on his face melted into something raw and painful. Out, he said. I'm going, I yelled. I just wanted to make sure you got your carbs. Not you, Silas roared, standing up. He looked at the executives. Everyone, out, now. The room froze. Did I stutter? Silas's voice dropped to that terrifying alpha growl that shook the windows. Clear the room, now. The executives scrambled. Papers flew. Chairs scraped. Genevieve looked like she had been slapped. Silas, you can't be serious, she hissed. The council. Get out, Genevieve, he snarled. She grabbed her purse and fled. Within 30 seconds, the boardroom was empty. Just me, Silas, and the pancakes. You shouldn't be here, Silas said, breathing hard. It's not safe. Stop trying to save me, I shouted, tears finally spilling over. I don't need saving. I need you to be honest. Are you marrying her? No. Silas moved around the table, closing the distance between us. That was a leak. The council released it to force my hand. I haven't agreed to anything. Then why did you leave? I shoved his chest. Why did you run away? Because they threatened to burn your restaurant down, he yelled back, grabbing my wrists to stop me from shoving him again. They threatened you, Cleo. I can lose the money. I can lose the crown. I cannot lose you. I froze. He was panting, his golden eyes wild with panic. You, I sniffed. You were protecting me? I was trying to, he whispered, pulling me closer.
But you make it very difficult.
I'm not a damsel, Silas, I said, my voice breaking. I'm a partner. If we're doing this, we do it together. You don't get to decide when to shut me out. I know, he groaned. I know. You're impossible. He stared at my mouth. I stared at his. The anger evaporated, replaced by 3 days of starvation. Kiss me, I demanded, or I'll throw these pancakes at you again. Please don't, he murmured. And then he kissed me. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate, possessive, and tasted like coffee and relief. He lifted me up, setting me on the mahogany table, knocking over a pitcher of water. I wrapped my arms around his neck, pulling him closer, finally understanding that the safest place in the world wasn't behind a stove. It was right here, in the eye of the storm. Chapter 13. The kiss lasted for a minute or an hour. Time didn't seem to apply in the boardroom anymore. When we finally broke apart, I was breathless, my legs dangling off the edge of the billion-dollar table, and Silas was resting his forehead against mine, his hands gripping my waist like he was afraid I'd evaporate. Okay, I whispered, tracing the line of his jaw. So we're clear. No marrying Genevieve. No ghosting. No marrying Genevieve. He agreed, his voice rough. But Cleo, the problem hasn't gone away. The council is still outside that door, metaphorically speaking, and they still want my head. So give them something else, I said, straightening his tie. What do they actually want? They want to know you aren't weak. They think being with a human makes you weak. Silas pulled back, his expression hardening. They want a competency test. I blinked. Like a written exam? Multiple choice? An assessment dinner, Silas explained, looking disgusted. It's an archaic tradition from the old laws. If a prime alpha chooses a mate of questionable standing, that's you, the council elders have the right to inspect the union. They come to dinner. They test your temperament. They test your ability to handle the pressure of the pack. If they deem you unfit, the pack is released from their allegiance to me. I lose everything. They want to come to dinner? I asked, my chef brain instantly switching gears from romance to logistics. Like, at the restaurant? Yes, they want to come to the griddle and growl. They want to see you in your element, and they want to tear you apart. Silas shook his head. I'm going to refuse. I'll tell them to go to hell. We'll leave the city. I have accounts they can't touch in the Caymans. Run away? I slid off the table, landing on my feet. Absolutely not. Cleo, these men are vipers. They will insult you. They will mock your food. They will try to make you cry just to see if I'll snap and kill them. Let them come, I said, smoothing down my apron. A cold, determined calm settled over me. This I could handle. I couldn't handle geopolitical shifter politics or stock markets, but I could handle difficult diners. I had served brunch to hungover sorority girls on New Year's Day. I had dealt with Yelp reviewers who complained that the ice was too cold. 3 old werewolves were nothing. You want to host them? Silas looked at me like I was insane. I don't want to host them. I want to roast them, I corrected. They think I'm weak? Fine.
I'll feed them.
I'll serve them a meal so perfect, so undeniable, that they'll choke on their own prejudice. Cooking is control, Silas. In my kitchen, I am the alpha. Silas watched me. He saw the fire in my eyes, the same fire that had led me to throw a pancake at his face. Slowly, a grin spread across his face. It was the dangerous, predatory grin I had fallen for. You really think you can handle the High Council? I think, I said, picking up the takeout box of rejected pancakes, that they have no idea who they're dealing with. Call them. Tell them dinner is tomorrow night, and tell them to bring their appetites. And if we fail? Silas asked, the vulnerability creeping back in. If they vote against us? I walked over to the elevator, pressing the button. I looked back at him, chin high. Then we go to the Caymans, I said. But not before I give them food poisoning for dessert. Silas laughed. It was a true, deep sound that banished the shadows in the room. Tomorrow night, he agreed. God help them. I stepped into the elevator. The doors closed on Silas's smiling face. But as the car descended, the smile dropped from mine. I had talked a big game, but I had 24 hours to plan a menu that would save a kingdom. I leaned my head against the cool metal wall. Okay, Cleo, I whispered to myself. Time to prep. Chapter 14. The kitchen of the Griddle and Growl was usually a symphony of controlled chaos. Today, it was a bomb site of tension. The acidity is off, Silas announced, peering into a pot of reduction sauce that he had no business being near. It needs more shallots. Do we have shallots? I can have a crate flown in from Provence within the hour. I slammed my knife down on the cutting board, severing a stalk of celery with a violence that made Marco flinch. Silas, I said, turning slowly to face the Alpha King. If you ask me about shallots one more time, I am going to debone you. Silas was pacing the length of the prep line like a caged tiger. He was back in a tuxedo, looking devastatingly handsome and completely unhinged. He had been hovering for 3 hours, touching things, checking the temperature of the walk-in, and vibrating with an anxiety that was making my hollandaise threaten to split. I am merely ensuring perfection, he countered, straightening his cufflinks. The council has palates that are antiquated. They expect classic French cuisine. They expect subservience. We are serving them. What is this? Short ribs? Braised beef short ribs with a coffee chili glaze, I corrected, pointing the knife at him. Served over polenta. It's heavy, it's rich, and it forces them to sleep afterwards. It's tactical food, Silas. Now stop vibrating. You're curdling the cream. I am not vibrating. You are emitting a low-frequency hum that is rattling the spice rack, I pointed out. He stopped pacing and looked at me. His golden eyes were wide, filled with a raw, terrifying vulnerability. They can take everything, Cleo. If they vote no tonight, the assets are frozen permanently. The titles are stripped. I become nobody. I wiped my hands on my apron and walked over to him. I reached up, grabbed the lapels of his ludicrously expensive jacket, and yanked him down until we were nose to nose. You are Silas Thatcher, I whispered fiercely. You survived the pack wars. You built an empire. You ate a ghost pepper omelet without crying. You are not nobody. And I am not just a cook. We are a team. But right now, the captain of the team needs the quarterback to get out of the locker room so she can lace up her boots. Silas stared at me, his breath hitching. You mixed your sports metaphors.
I don't care about sports, I shouted, spinning him around and marching him toward the swinging doors. I care about the reduction. Go to the dining room, sit at the head of the table, look scary. Let me handle the food. Cleo, go! I pushed him through the doors. I turned back to the kitchen. Marco was staring at me, wide-eyed. Did you just manhandle the king? He whispered. He needed it, I muttered, checking the sauce. He's a control freak. He forgets that I'm the one with the knives. The clock on the wall ticked to 6:55 p.m. The dinner was set for 7. I took a deep breath. The menu was set. No dainty salads, no foam. We were doing elevated diner, comfort food with a dagger in it. If they wanted to judge me for being a human who ran a breakfast joint, I was going to shove that identity down their throats until they asked for seconds. Chef, Marco hissed from the window. They're here! I walked to the pass and peeked through the blinds. 3 black limousines had pulled up to the curb. The doors opened in unison. 3 men stepped out. They were ancient. They wore old-fashioned suits that looked like they smelled of mothballs and judgment. They didn't walk. They glided, radiating an aura of disdain that withered the potted plant by the door. Silas stood by the entrance, rigid as a statue. He opened the door for them. They didn't shake his hand. They walked past him, scanning the restaurant with looks of utter revulsion, as if they had just stepped into a sewer. My stomach did a somersault. Okay, I said to the empty kitchen, grabbing my tray. Showtime. Chapter 15. The dining room had been transformed. We had pushed tables together to form one long banquet table, covered in crisp white linen. Candles flickered, casting long shadows against the retro diner walls. It looked like a black tie event held inside a jukebox. I waited in the shadows of the service station, watching them sit. Silas sat at the head. To his right sat Elder Magnus, a man whose face looked like crumpled parchment paper. To his left were Elders Crouch and Thorn, who looked like they shared a single brain cell dedicated entirely to snobbery. It smells... Magnus sniffed the air, wrinkling his nose. Rustic. It smells like grease, Thorn corrected, running a finger over the tablecloth as if checking for dust. I suppose we shouldn't expect much. The female is, after all, a laborer. Silas's hands clenched on the table. The wood groaned audibly under his grip. His eyes began to glow a faint, dangerous gold. The female, Silas ground out, his voice low, is the owner of this establishment, and she is my mate. Potential mate, Magnus corrected sharply. Let us not get ahead of ourselves, Silas. We are here to see if she is suitable to carry the Thatcher line. Judging by the environment, I have concerns about her breeding. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, not shame, but pure, unadulterated rage. Breeding? I wasn't a prize mare. I was a business owner with a 4.8-star rating on Google. Silas looked ready to flip the table. He started to rise, his canines lengthening. Gentlemen, I announced, stepping out of the shadows before Silas could commit murder. I walked toward the table, carrying a large silver tray. I didn't bow. I didn't curtsy. I walked with the smooth, silent gait of someone who had spent 10 years navigating crowded kitchens. Welcome to the Griddle and Growl, I said, my voice steady. I'm Cleo. I'll be your chef this evening. The 3 elders looked at me. Their eyes raked over my chef's coat, my messy bun, and my practical shoes. Charmed, Magnus deadpanned. I assume you have prepared something edible? I have prepared a menu that reflects the history of this establishment, I said, setting the first course down in front of them. It was a soup, specifically a roasted tomato bisque with a miniature grilled cheese crouton floating in the center, garnished with basil oil. Magnus looked at the bowl. He looked at the spoon. He looked at me. "Tomato soup?" he scoffed. "We are the High Council, girl, not toddlers on a snow day." "It's a deconstructed classic," Silas interjected, trying to help. "It's peasant food," Thorne sneered, pushing the bowl away. "I suppose a human wouldn't know the difference between haute cuisine and dog food." The air in the room vanished. Silas stood up. His chair flew backward, crashing to the floor. A low, vibrating growl ripped from his chest, shaking the silverware. "You will not," Silas roared, "disrespect her in my house." The elders didn't flinch. They looked at Silas with bored amusement. They wanted this. They wanted him to lose control. If he attacked them, he proved he was unstable. He proved he was unfit to be king. I moved faster than thought. I stepped between Silas and the table, placing a hand firmly on his chest. He was hard as granite, vibrating with violence. "Silas," I said calmly, looking into his wild eyes. "Sit down." "Cleo, he called it—" "I heard him," I interrupted, keeping my voice light. "He thinks it's dog food. That's fine. Palates degrade with age. It's a common medical condition." The silence that followed was deafening. Magnus's jaw dropped. I turned to the elders, a smile on my face that was all teeth and zero warmth. "Please," I gestured to the bowls. "Eat. Or don't. But I'd hate for you to go back to the council hungry. It makes one so cranky." I picked up Silas's fallen chair and set it upright. I pushed him gently into it. "Enjoy the wine, gentlemen," I said sweetly. "I need to check the roast. It requires a lot of heat. Like this conversation." I turned and walked back to the kitchen, feeling 3 pairs of hateful eyes and 1 pair of adoring ones burning a hole in my back. The kitchen was a sanctuary, but I didn't stay there long. I gave myself exactly 10 seconds to hyperventilate into a towel, then I plated the main course. Short ribs, dark, sticky, falling off the bone, resting on a bed of creamy polenta that looked like liquid gold. I grabbed the carving knife, my best knife, a 10-inch blade that gleamed under the heat lamps. "Marco," I said, "stay here. If I scream, call the police. If they scream, call a hearse." I marched back out. The mood in the dining room was toxic. The elders had eaten the soup. I noticed the bowls were empty, but they looked angry about enjoying it. Silas was sitting in stony silence, staring at Magnus like he was visualizing which artery to sever first. "And here we are," Magnus was saying as I approached, "relying on a human to feed the Wolf King. It's symbolic, really. You've become domesticated, Silas. You've traded your claws for a— what is it she does? Flips pancakes?" "I own 3 restaurants," Silas said through gritted teeth, "and a shipping conglomerate. But your heart," Magnus tapped his chest, "is in the kitchen. Weak." I set the platter down in the center of the table with a heavy thud. "Gentlemen," I said, my voice cutting through the tension. "Main course." I didn't serve them individual plates. I placed the roast in the center, whole. I stood at the head of the table next to Silas, holding the carving knife. "You speak a lot about weakness, Elder Magnus," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "And about domestication. It's interesting." "Do not speak to me directly, girl," Magnus snapped. "You are here to serve, not to opine."
Oh, I'm serving, I said, slicing into the meat. The blade slid through the tender beef like it was butter. But you see, in a kitchen, we have a saying about ingredients. The loudest ones are usually the cheapest. Silas looked up at me, his eyes widening. I continued, my voice steady, slicing portion after portion with rhythmic, dangerous precision. You look at Silas and see a man who eats pancakes and think he's weak, I said, sliding a piece of meat onto Magnus's plate with a little too much force. But you're confusing weakness with restraint. Any animal can bite. Any wolf can kill. That's easy. That's fast food. I moved to Thorne's plate. Slice. Serve. But to build something? I gestured around the room with the knife. To run an empire? To tolerate disrespect from 3 men who haven't hunted their own dinner in 50 years? That takes discipline. That takes a palate for the long game. Magnus stood up, his face purple. You insolent little... Sit down, I barked. It wasn't a request. It was a command. It was the voice I used when the line was in the weeds and the tickets were piling up. To my shock, and his, Magnus sat. You call me a pet? I said, leaning over the table, the knife resting on the platter. You think I'm a liability. But let me tell you something about cooking. If you don't respect the heat, you get burned. Silas isn't domesticated. He's just picky. He was starving for something real, and he found it. I looked at Silas. He was looking at me with an expression of pure, unadulterated worship. He doesn't want a queen who sits on a throne and looks pretty, I told the elders. He wants a partner who can handle the fire, and frankly, looking at you 3, I paused, looking them up and down with a critical chef's eye. You look overcooked, dry, bitter, and past your expiration date. The silence stretched. It was absolute. The elders looked like they had been slapped with a wet trout. They stared at me, then at the knife, then at Silas. Silas let out a sound. It started low in his chest and erupted into a laugh, a loud, booming, joyous laugh that filled the room. I told you, Silas gasped, wiping a tear from his eye. I told you she bites. Magnus looked at his short ribs. He looked at me, standing there with my knife and my apron, defying the most powerful council in the hemisphere. Slowly, begrudgingly, Magnus picked up his fork. He took a bite of the beef. He chewed. He swallowed. The seasoning, Magnus grumbled, avoiding my eyes, is adequate. It's excellent, Silas corrected, grabbing my hand and kissing the knuckles, right over the handle of the knife. She's the alpha here, gentlemen. I suggest you finish your plates before she decides to kick you out of her kitchen. Chapter 17. The sound of 3 ancient werewolves aggressively eating short ribs in total silence is a sound I will never forget. It was the auditory equivalent of a surrender treaty being signed in barbecue sauce. For 20 minutes, the only noise in the griddle and growl was the scrape of silverware against china, and the occasional satisfied grunt that Elder Magnus tried desperately to suppress. They ate everything. They wiped the plates with the sourdough bread. They drank the wine. I stood by the pass, arms crossed, watching them like a hawk. Marco was hiding in the walk-in cooler, too terrified to witness the outcome, but I wasn't looking away. I had cooked for my life, and I intended to watch the jury deliver the verdict. Finally, Magnus placed his napkin on the table. He didn't look happy about it, but he looked full. And a full wolf is a docile wolf. He stood up. The other 2 scrambled to follow suit. Well, Magnus said, smoothing his jacket over his stomach. He looked at Silas, then slowly, painfully, turned his gaze to me. The meal was substantial. Thank you, I said, not moving an inch. And your demeanor, Magnus continued, his lip curling slightly, is abrasive. You lack the grace of a courtier. You are loud, you are opinionated, and you clearly have no respect for tradition. My heart sank. I gripped the edge of the counter. However, Magnus added, leaning in slightly, you defend your territory, you feed your pack, and you apparently have the spine to stand between an alpha and his rage. He glanced at Silas, who was looking at me with an expression that could only be described as smitten. The council values strength, Magnus concluded, even if it comes packaged in a grease-stained apron. We will not oppose the union. For now. It was the most backhanded compliment I had ever received, but it was a victory.
Don't let the door hit you on the way out, I thought. But out loud, I simply said, "Drive safe, gentlemen." They swept out of the restaurant like a dark cloud lifting. The heavy door clicked shut behind them. The silence that followed was heavy, but it wasn't the silence of tension. It was the silence of a bomb having been defused with 1 second on the clock. I let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding since Tuesday. My knees turned to water. I slumped against the pass, the adrenaline crashing out of my system. "You," Silas said, breaking the silence. He didn't walk toward me. He prowled. He closed the distance in 3 long strides. He didn't stop until he was standing inside my personal space, radiating heat and triumph. "You are insane," he whispered, his voice rough. "You insulted the High Elders. You threatened them with a carving knife. You called them expired." "They started it," I mumbled, looking up at him. "And they liked the beef." "They loved the beef, but that's not why they left." Silas reached out, his large hands gripping my waist. Effortlessly, he lifted me up and set me onto the stainless steel counter, stepping between my knees. "They left because they realized they couldn't scare you. They realized that if they came for me, they'd have to get through you first." "I told you," I said, wrapping my arms around his neck, feeling the tension in his shoulders finally dissolve. "I protect my kitchen. You just happen to be in it." Silas laughed, a low rumble against my chest. He rested his forehead against mine. "Is that all I am? Kitchen equipment?" "Your high-maintenance equipment," I corrected, running my fingers through the hair at the nape of his neck. "Like the espresso machine. But I think I'll keep you." Silas pulled back to look at me. His golden eyes were soft, stripped of all the kingly armor. "I didn't fall for you because of the pancakes, Cleo," he admitted quietly. "I fell for you because you were the first person in 100 years who dared to throw one at me. I don't want a subject. I don't want a fan. I want this. I want the fire." He kissed me then, slow and deep, tasting of victory and wine. It was a promise. It was a seal. It was the best thing on the menu. When we finally broke apart, the restaurant was dark, save for the street lights filtering in. "So," Silas murmured, trailing kisses down my jawline. "We won. The council is gone. The assets are safe. What do you want? Name it. A car? An island? A new stove?" I pulled back, breathless. I looked around my kitchen. It was a mess. There were dirty pots, grease splatters, and a pile of dishes that looked like a leaning tower of ceramic doom. "I don't want an island, Silas," I said, hopping off the counter. I walked over to the hook by the door and grabbed a spare apron. It was white, stiff, and definitely not tailored for a billionaire in a tuxedo. I walked back to him and held it out. "You promised," I said, a wicked smile spreading across my face. "You said if you wanted to be with me, you'd work for it."
Silas looked at the apron. He looked at the mountain of dirty dishes in the sink. He looked at me. "You want the king of the shifters to be your dishwasher?" he asked, arching an eyebrow. "No," I said, tossing the apron at his chest. He caught it instinctively. "On my partner to help me close. Unless, of course, the task is too difficult for a prime alpha." Silas stared at me for a beat. Then he slowly began to unbutton his suit jacket. He tossed it onto a chair. He rolled up his sleeves, revealing those corded forearms. He tied the apron around his waist. It looked ridiculous. It looked perfect. "You're going to regret this," he growled playfully, walking toward the sink and turning on the spray nozzle. "Because once I start scrubbing, Cleo, I don't stop until everything is spotless." He sprayed me with the hose. I shrieked, dodging the water. "Hey, that is abuse of power!" "Mutiny in the kitchen," Silas declared, advancing on me with the sprayer, a predatory gleam in his eye that had nothing to do with dishes. "I think the captain needs to be disciplined." Chapter 18. "Runner, I need hands on table 12. The eggs are dying in the window." I slammed a plate of Eggs Benedict onto the pass, wiping a bead of sweat from my forehead with the back of my wrist. The griddle and growl wasn't just busy, it was a war zone. Since the council dinner 3 months ago, we hadn't just gone viral, we had become a pilgrimage site. We were fully booked until 2028. People didn't just come for the food anymore, they came for the show. And the star of the show was currently 20 minutes late. "Where is he?" I growled, flipping a row of pancakes with practiced lethal precision. "If he's stuck in a board meeting, I'm going to charge him a late fee. And by late fee, I mean I'm going to make him peel 50 pounds of potatoes." "He just texted," Marco yelled over the hiss of the fryer. "He's landing on the roof. Apparently, the trade negotiations with the Eastern Pac ran long." "I don't care about the Eastern Pac," I snapped, grabbing a squeeze bottle of batter. "I care about the brunch rush. We are down a man, Marco." The back door flew open with a bang that rattled the pans on the wall. Silas Thatcher burst into the kitchen. He looked like he had just sprinted from a GQ photo shoot. He was wearing a navy Italian suit, a crisp white shirt, and a silk tie that probably cost more than my car. He was breathless, his hair slightly windswept, and his eyes were glowing with the residual adrenaline of whatever geopolitical crisis he had just solved. "I'm here," he announced, stripping off his suit jacket and tossing it haphazardly onto the dry storage rack. "The Prime Minister wouldn't stop talking about tariffs. I threatened to annex his summer home if he didn't let me leave." He rolled up his sleeves as he walked, revealing the Rolex on one wrist and the burn scar on the other, a souvenir from his first attempt at using the deep fryer. "You're late, sous chef," I said, not looking up from the grill. "Wash up, you're on garnish duty." "Garnish duty?" Silas scoffed, moving to the sink and scrubbing his hands with the intensity of a surgeon. "I negotiated peace between 3 warring factions this morning. I think I can handle the grill." "The last time you handled the grill, we lost eyebrows," I reminded him. "Garnish, parsley, go." Silas dried his hands, grabbed his custom black apron, embroidered with "The King" in gold thread, a gag gift from Marco, and tied it around his waist. He stepped up beside me, bumping his hip against mine. "You missed me," he murmured, his voice dropping to that low, vibrating frequency that still made my knees weak, even after 90 days. "I missed your hands," I lied, focusing on the bacon. "I need parsley on the scrambling, Thatcher. Less talking, more working." He chuckled. leaning down to press a quick, searing kiss to the sensitive spot behind my ear. Yes, chef. For the next hour, we were a machine. The king of the shifters stood shoulder to shoulder with me, sprinkling herbs and plating toast. He barked orders at the runners. He intimidated the dishwasher into working faster just by looking at him. It was chaotic, it was hot, and it was perfect. By 1 p.m., the rush finally began to taper off. The tickets stopped printing their endless stream of doom. I leaned back against the prep table, exhaling a long sigh. Silas handed me a glass of water. You survived, he said, wiping a smudge of flour from his cheek. He looked ridiculous, a billionaire covered in kitchen grime, and I had never loved him more. We survived, I corrected, taking the water. You did good today, Thatcher. Your parsley distribution was adequate. Adequate? Silas raised an eyebrow. I aim for exceptional. He glanced at the grill, where a small amount of leftover batter was sitting in the bowl. A mischievous glint entered his golden eyes. In fact, he said, picking up a ladle, I think I'm ready to graduate. Silas, no, I warned, straightening up. Put the ladle down. I've been watching you, he said, pouring a circle of batter onto the hot metal. It's all in the wrist, isn't it? The flip, the commit. Silas, you have the fine motor skills of a tank, I said, reaching for the spatula. Don't do it. Trust your alpha, he grinned, blocking my hand with his hip. He waited. He watched the bubbles form. He looked focused, intense, treating the pancake like it was a hostile nation he needed to conquer. Ready? He whispered. No, I said. He grabbed the spatula. He slid it under the pancake. He bent his knees, took a deep breath, and flipped. He used too much power, way too much power. The pancake didn't just flip, it launched. It soared through the air with majestic velocity, sailing over his head, over the prep station, and straight toward me. I didn't have time to duck. Splat. The warm, half-cooked pancake hit me square in the face. It stuck for a glorious, gravity-defying second before sliding down my nose and landing on my chest. The kitchen went dead silent. Marco gasped. The runners froze. I stood there, batter, dripping from my chin, looking at the man who ruled the hemisphere. Silas froze. His eyes went wide. He looked at the empty spatula, then at me. Oh, he whispered. I slowly peeled the pancake off my shirt. I looked at it. I looked at him. Run, I said softly. Silas didn't run. He laughed. He threw his head back and roared with laughter, the sound echoing off the tile. It's a perfect circle, he crowed. You have to admit the aerodynamics were flawless. I'm going to kill you, I announced, grabbing a handful of flour from the bin. Worth it. He grinned, backing away, his hands raised in surrender, but his eyes dancing with joy. You look delicious, Cleo. Come here, I yelled, launching the flour. He didn't dodge. He let the white cloud hit him in the chest, coating his expensive Italian suit in dust. Then he lunged. He tackled me, wrapping his arms around my waist and lifting me off the floor, spinning me around in the center of the kitchen while the staff cheered. Put me down! I shrieked, laughing despite myself. You're ruining the health code! I own the building, Silas whispered against my lips, pulling me tight against him, flour and batter and sweat and all. I make the codes. And right now, the code says I have to kiss the chef. He kissed me, tasting of victory and vanilla batter. The ticket machine started printing again. Another rush, another challenge. But for the first time in my life, I let it wait. The orders could pile up. The alpha was busy. Quick favor. Don't go anywhere yet. If you thought Silas was intense over a pancake, just wait. In this next story, the heroine accidentally crushes the Alpha King's toes under the dinner table with a sharp designer stiletto. He doesn't scream. He grabs her ankle and refuses to let go. Click the video on your screen right now to watch Is That Your Foot? You do not want to miss this.